Greetings, all you phenomenal human beings who are worthy of love. Shekoli, Narioli with Skanagoga, Skanago. We're in Oneida. Greetings, what is the news? Are you with peace? I am with peace. It is honestly a pleasure and an honor to be learning alongside each and every one of you. I don't mean to say this as a cliche, I mean it in all sincerity. I'm learning more from you all than I believe you all are from me. Each and every one of you, I honestly believe like could be just up here as the instructor. And one of the reasons why I offer the classes I do in this circle format is because I believe we are all lifelong learners. And I believe, and as we say in Oneida in our opening prayer, let's put our minds together, so be it in our minds. And looking at the module 3 responses here, just want to give a Yawonko shout out here as we enter into our circle process here with Eagle Feather. Cannot tell a lie and have to tell the truth here. And just want to say, Yawonko, thank you, Bessie, for naming that that quote there from the Towery, the author Towery, and on the idea of disempowering Maori by using their own justice process while denying them a significant measure of jurisdictional autonomy. I really appreciate you naming that as well too. This what can be this a Maori practice, but when used by disempowering and not allowing Maori people to have their voice in the process, it can really be another step of colonialism. The question you offer: how do we do restorative work within an ecosystem that feeds off of power hoarding? And I would say the short answer there from Chief Warren Lyons is is value change for survival. And that's definitely easier said than done. And I think that question you're asking is really the important part of how do we do this restorative work within an ecosystem that feeds off of power hoarding? What do we do with that? Sylvie, always appreciate your response in videos. Thanks for that. I appreciate you sharing your example of how the state justice system and forms of control can oftentimes cause more harm, particularly in the example you use from the tribal justice of this young person who was not able to be reunited with their family. And you pose this question: how is anyone expected to be going through this process of healing, of restoration without these connections and without the support? Great insight. Xiao, I always appreciate learning from you. You have such phenomenal insight. Your spirit always shines through. And I really appreciate you. Thank you for the insight on the Chinese word relations by showing the characters there. And that connections you made, and that idea, the ability to provide support, access, and opportunity for individuals through relationships. And I think that's such a powerful idea as well too. Really appreciate you naming that. Rebecca, an honor to learn from you. Absolutely phenomenal insight when you were naming Danielle Sered in that first paragraph about how, in your first paragraph of your response, and how if prisons made us safer, the US would be the safest place in the world. And as we know, that is not the case. And so recognizing just the myth and that notion that by having more prisons that people would be safer. And I really appreciate your articulation for the inner circle and outer circle for Hollow Water, that giving people the ability to witness from the outside and engage in the middle of the circle as well. And I love the notion of healing and justice being interconnected for Indigenous communities. Very well stated, Rebecca. Appreciate that a lot. Carolina, excellent insight as well too. When you're talking about the Hollow Water Community Circle healing and reading, I deeply appreciated your scientific analysis of intergenerational trauma and how the trauma can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes. As we also talk about this intergenerational resiliency, strength, and love as well. And I also agree with how you named within our current legal system, our Western legal framework, how people, when they're going to testify, are often not instructed or encouraged to speak from their heart space or their spirit. Oftentimes that's coached against, spoken against, advised against. And thank you for sharing your perspective on how to move away from tokenization towards different Indigenous peoples and roles, whether they be in Canada, New Zealand, or elsewhere, and towards empowerment for Indigenous appointed peoples to be able to have a say and be able to have not have a ceiling, but be able to make real change. So I love that as well too, naming that how highlighting that negative side of it as pointed out in the reading, and then also saying that there's also a plausibility for positivity that can come from this as well too. Jacqueline, always a pleasure to learn from you, and it's amazing this is your first restorative justice class because you already just offer so much insight and wisdom. And I love that notion. When we heal ourselves, we're helping heal our ancestors whose memory and blood lives on inside of us. Thank you for sharing the quotes by Chief Justice Robert Yazzie. To learn about peacemaking takes a lifetime, and also to achieve stability, you must address the chaos. Some phenomenal quotes there as well. Alana, it's always such a pleasure to learn from you. Thanks for your video, and thanks for sharing your dog Luna as well. So Yawanko, Miigwich, and you bring up an excellent point, which about this tension which exists in circumstances where justice is needed with tribal and non-tribal members, and whether the tribal member is a victim or offender, which system of justice is uplifted, whose sovereignty is applied. think these are all phenomenal, excellent questions. Answer that from two parts. Answer it one first from like the legal standing of it, and then two from what I've experienced as a practitioner in trying to do these, implement these. So first and foremost, from the legal side, well, 1978 Supreme Court case of Oliphant versus Suquamish ruled native tribal courts do not have power to prosecute over non-tribal members. It's McGirt versus Oklahoma in 2020, and it stated that courts no longer have jurisdiction to prosecute crimes by or against tribal members who live in Oklahoma. And then as soon after ruling is in 2022, ruling of Oklahoma versus Castro Huerta, the Supreme Court ruled Oklahoma had concurrent jurisdiction with the federal government involving crimes committed by non-Indians against Indians in Indian country. So what you're talking about existing in this gray area is in between the state justice system, the federal justice system, and tribal justice systems. I think this is an excellent question, worthy of investigation. I know in myself, when I've been brought in to do some cases which are alternative to a punitive or alternative to punishment, and I'll try to be, and I'll be working on a case with Native and non-Native peoples in a form of restoration and reconciliation, oftentimes using the approach of like a Native practice. And I can tell you, as Alana makes up a good point, if people don't have the values, and if people aren't bringing those values into the practice, then the practice can be disrespected. It can be kind of just ignored. It can be if people are not willing to be in this process voluntarily and with respect, then the process can go awry. It can cause more harm. So it's a great point, and it doesn't feel great when you put forth a spiritual practice and for people to disrespect it. I can tell you that. So what Alana, the question you bring up in that tension is a phenomenal question. What does the system look like? I think there has to be some kind of agreement on the parties involved of the process. I think in when possible, using that more restorative lens and letting people tell their stories. But I think it's a really great question you name in terms of that naming that tension that does very much exist in that gray area between systems. So one that we'll keep on working to unpack together throughout the semester. Looking forward to your responses in further modules and our further sharing. I want to say here, Brandy, thank you for your video and talking about the seesaw, this horizontal system for oftentimes indigenous communities and what we know as a vertical system oftentimes for Western legal constructs. So thanks just for naming that as well too. I think that's a great metaphor. Really appreciate that as well too. Thank you very much, Dr. Egan. And then going along here to Samuel, excellent insight. Thank you for sharing your insight on the James Guest article, focusing on the Navajo peacemaking. I love the idea of relationships being in flux and the ability for people to be constantly changing and not just to be static, but to be dynamic. Excellent reframing using the Guest article of how Western systems have ascribed certain individuals as, quote, bad actors, as opposed to, quote, acted badly, naming that from the article there. So excellent insight, Samuel. Really appreciate the work you're doing. Zachary, fantastic. I really appreciate your articulation when you said a matter of cognition and behavior versus a matter of spirit and emotion when talking about these different approaches to justice from a Western legal framework to an indigenous framework, generally speaking. And I really appreciate when you also said, in writings about the community holistic circle healing in the 6 Canadian Aboriginal communities, the goal is peace, not punishment. Ideas of healing the spirit versus preventing behaviors is a shift in paradigm that not only results in creating peace, but also brings a true definition of justice to community. Really love that. Joellen, phenomenal insight, as always. Your ability to open up and be courageous. There's so much learning to be had from you and your life and your experiences. And thanks for your courage and wisdom to share. It's really been an honor to learn from you. I appreciated you when you're talking about your service working with in representing children in neglect and abuse cases as a legal guardian. And you're talking about wanting to do something differently. And oftentimes this pushback of people saying, well, this is how we've always done it. And yet it seemed to be obvious that by offering the same services, it was not working. We saw families remain the same system or return to the system multiple times and throughout generations. Also, you went on to say, for some reason, our current system believes that someone has to lose, but the truth is we all lose with the current systems. Very well said. And here, just appreciate you being willing to share this when you talked about how you say, I learned from my own experience that I did not feel healed once Ryan, I have permission to use his name, was punished for the shooting death of my brother. My real healing came years later when Ryan and I were finally able to sit down and talk and hear each other's stories. Thank you so much, Joellen. I know that story is just and like replaying through my head in terms of the power of restoration, reconciliation, what that looks like. How do we set up these formal or informal systems? How do we, as Daniel Shred says, the systems we've brought us have brought us to where we are today. If we want to move somewhere forward, we need to think differently and put in, reconstruct new systems as well. And Ainsley, AJ, really appreciate you talking about your insight here. You talk about spirituality permeates Aboriginal, Indigenous, traditional healing and peacemaking processes. In a way, our main criminal justice system is severely lacking, instead relying on brute force and punishment as its power base. And I really appreciate your insight here. Another one that's been sticking with me. When you said, this full moon has brought to light many ways in my own life. I'm still wearing my armor and preventing myself from living in my full truth. That is of embracing true love for myself and everyone around me. I just think that's beautiful and poetic that we are all looking up underneath the same moon. I once had an acupuncturist and I've had some health issues, and over time I also have some flare-ups, and every now and again they'd be like, oh, full moon. So that's one of our reminders there of our connection with that as well. And that being said, about my recognizing my connection to each and every one of you, that we are all interrelated, we are all connected, that we all drink from the same stream of consciousness. What you do to my people, you do what you do to your people, you do to my people. For my people are your people, and your people are my people. We are all connected. I love you all very much, people. We're going to continue on here, going on to our week 4 lecture here. So again, Yawonko, thank you all very much. Doing phenomenal so far. Hope you're doing well. Invitation, not an obligation, but if you want to, sitting up like a string's pulling through your head, sitting up nice and tall, the deepest breath of love you've had all day. Breathe in some love. Exhale some love. You are loved, you are worthy of love. Let us continue, friends. All right, response to module 3, really appreciated that. I know a number of you have named the Juan Marcellus Towery article on co-opting getting in the way of the process. And as pointed out as well too, there's no monolithic answer. I think it's really important to see these different perspectives and hear these different ideas as well too. I think it's very important to have that accountability and have that conversation. And then also, whether you're an Indigenous person, whether you are an ally, I think it's so powerful to be able to model how to acknowledge, educate, and honor, keeping the spirit of the practice and the respect for the practice as well too, and how to model that as a practitioner. I've had multiple times after semesters after people read this article, people reaching out to me and being like, well, this makes me kind of question like everything I'm doing. Should I keep doing what I'm doing? And I say, absolutely. I hope you keep doing restorative practices. And I hope, as noted there by Jacqueline, and it talked about by Chief Justice Robert Yazzie, learning about peacemaking is a lifelong process. So I hope that you never stop being a lifelong learner. And I hope that you always continue to acknowledge, educate, and honor the practices where it comes from traditionally, and also educating others as well too in your process. And I think that one quote that comes to mind as well too when we're talking about this is, it's one that I noted in one of the first articles we read from week 1, and it was from a study, Daly et al. 2006. This is one of the responses from one of the Native participants in the program when talking about how when talking circles are missing this Indigenous philosophical foundation. And this program participant said, to culturalize the program to fit our Native American needs, including incorporating a talking circle, incorporating a self-help group, phone lines, and one of the biggest things I see is that it is so sterile. It's not culturally pleasing to me. Like with the 12-step program, they incorporated the 12 steps in a medicine wheel and gave every step a significance to our cultural identity. This, the second one brochure, on the other hand, is just another government-issued pamphlet, and we've been inundated with them. I mean, they're given to us all the time. They, focus groups and programs, are always great starts, and they mean well for us as Native people. But the problem with that is when they're not culturalized and we can't relate to it, then I lose interest as a Native person. We have to tailor it. 2 things. That's oral history. Remember that our history is oral, so we're just used to blowing off anything in writing. And secondly is visual identity. Do you want to know what my opinion of it is? I think this gives lip service to Native Americans. I see nothing other than the title, which is a catchy title. I see a design. Other than that, I don't see anything mentioned of the talking circle. I see nothing adapted being to natives. I think that's just a great reminder in this work as well too. For me, I think that's so key of having that spiritual element. Like Alana reminded us of, it's like the circle practice of we have a circle. And oftentimes when trying to fit it within academia or different Western models, it feels like we can kind of turn it into a square and kind of cut out a lot of that connectivity. And to me, then that starts just to kind of feel like icebreakers, or like just kind of almost like aspects of a board game or something, which is fun, but it's a lot different than like the spiritual healing process, which has been like the core of it for me. I feel like is like where like for me, one of the reasons why again we use an eagle feather is it has sacred properties, and it's the bird that flies the highest, and it's reminding you to have that vision of an eagle when you're speaking with it as well too. But it has sacred properties as well too, so that's part of that spiritual process as we engage in these processes. So just a thought that came to mind. Moving along here for week 4, I want you all to look at truth and reconciliation in the state child welfare system. Joellen, always looking forward to your insight as well too, as long as learning from all of you. And some readings before class, there's another book chapter from me. Someone's talking about intergenerational trauma and other unique challenges as barriers to Native American educational success. So talk about intergenerational trauma, also talk about intergenerational resiliency, the ability to have people talk and hold space for one another, such as my cousin Eddie Cornelius Grosskopf had taught me about using circles to deal with intergenerational trauma by using intergenerational strength. And also you're going to look at from Navajo Nation peacemaking introduction in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Some examples from the reading and some common themes you've been seeing, and especially in videos from Chief Justice Robert Yazzie from last week. Talk about Navajo justice is unique as it is the product of the experience of the Navajo people, otherwise known as Dene, meaning the people. The Navajo judges, quote, know the peacemaker court will work only if it is accepted by the people who are to make it work. And I think that quote really ties back into what Alana was saying as well too, that when you're being careful in this tension, when we're trying to implement practices of these restorative practices from this like traditional mindset, if you're going into it with people who are not accepting of it and they're not willing to make it work, then it likely will not work and will cause more harm. So it's a great point in naming that tension. I appreciate you naming that, Alana. Some different videos you're gonna be watching here. Here's the names of them. And here's a couple other optional ones as well too. You can YouTube the title of these as well too. For the Heart of Ikwabeki, Fawn Sharp enforcing the Indian Child Welfare Act to protect Native children. There's a number of videos in that Heart of Ikwa series as well. Indian Child Welfare Act. Here are some of those videos right now. A list of those videos for you all to watch. So curious to hear your thoughts and ideas on these. This one right here by Don Coyhis of the Mohican Nation. Pretty powerful video as well too. One speaks to me spiritually, as do many of these videos in their process, but this one in particular, just how to conduct this from this perspective of Don Coyhis of the Mohican Nation. So I really appreciate all your perspectives as well too. When we're going into the group meeting, we're going into the circles of what are your experiences with it, or what have you learned about it? And some of you have some experiences, whether it's with environmentally or with community in doing this restorative work legally. And some of you, this is you're learning about it. And just for each and every one of you, I really appreciate all of your perspectives. One other system I've heard about is Ho'oponopono in Hawaii, and this idea. Very complex, oftentimes supposed to be carried out by elders is how it's supposed to be done correctly. But a simplified idea of this is the idea of saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. But it's this process that could be used in a restorative way from a Hawaiian practice and tradition. Also, we look about in the genocide in Rwanda and this use of Ubuntu. I am because we are. This idea to help create healing when there's often a lot of trauma, a lot of pain from that genocide. Also looking at the Hollow Water Community Holistic Circle Healing Approach, and sacred spiritual practice and tradition connected to the creator for many different peoples. And we look at the cake circle making process in Alaska for the alcohol recovery program. Again, including but not limited to many different of these things we talk about in restorative justice in indigenous communities. And recognizing that we are all lifelong learners, and recognizing that we learn about these things with respect and reverence, that we look to acknowledge, educate, and honor these practices. Love some indigenous film and TV as well too, try to share some culture with you. So if you get a chance, Reservation Dogs has some humor as well too. And I love this, as a lot of the people talk about just that many people don't know that Native people, that humor is a big part for many different Native peoples. Again, not a monolith, but across different Native cultures of the 567 federally recognized, the 300 or so state recognized, other hundreds of tribes that are not recognized. I think humor is often used as a form of resiliency as well too. Other films, Smoke Signals, Number of films right here. Incident Oglala talks about the idea of Leonard Peltier. Maybe you've seen recently there was a number of demonstrations going on across Turtle Island, otherwise known as North America. And it was talking about resistance for Leonard Peltier, who's a political prisoner since 1977 for a crime which he did not commit. Number of other films here. Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World, really good one. If it's on Amazon Video, looking at influences of Native peoples in music. Real has a racial slur here, but this is talking about Native depictions in films, and over 4,000 films, and oftentimes misrepresentation of Native peoples in films, and the positive representation from when the format is used for people to tell their own stories. Some other examples here as well too. Just want you to check out. And with that being said, I just want to say, Yawanko Galunkwa Nugiwa, which means thank you, I love you. Until next time, you are all human beings who are worthy of love. It is honestly an honor to learn from each and every one of you. I'm just thrilled to be in this position. So I'm just sending you all love and good thoughts. Take care, everybody.